Thank you, sir. Senator Hinojosa, for what purpose?
Well, Senator Hughes, yield for a couple of questions.
Of course, I'll yield.
Senator Hughes, I don't have a whole bunch of questions, but I do have a few.
Okay.
Earlier in the session, we passed Senate Bill 17.
Yes, sir.
You recall that. And what it did, it allowed any licensed professional who held religious belief regarding marriage between one man and one woman to be able to deny services to a person who was LGBT or gay.
Senate Bill 17, okay.
Okay. So how does that differ from Senate Bill 1978?
No. Senator, thank you for asking. It's a very different bill. Now, Senator Perry worked hard to listen to different voices and to get Senate Bill 17 in a good form, and we passed that, and the Senate passed that by a big margin. This bill is very, very different. There's no reference in the bill, once we get the amendment on, there's no reference to sincerely held religious belief. There's no reference to marriage. The only thing this bill, if the bill goes forward with the amendment, the only thing the bill will affect is your affiliation with, contribution to a religious organization. So it's very different. We support Senator Perry's bill, but this is a very different bill.
Well, you talk about the principle that government cannot discriminate because of religious beliefs, and I totally believe in that. But at the same time, under Senate Bill 17, you allowed government to license an individual that provides certain services that were allowed by the government. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to provide those services to discriminate.
Under Senate Bill 17, the mechanics work a little differently. But under this bill, if the amendment goes on, the only thing this bill will affect is the government treating people differently, discriminating against people based on their affiliation with a religious organization or giving money to a religious organization. So you're right, Senate Bill 17 is an important bill, but it's very different from this one.
Well, let me ask you, is this really a serious problem for business?
Senator, the case of Chick-fil-A has gotten a lot of people's attention. You know, it did happen in San Antonio, but not just there. That was San Antonio. This happened in March, on April 8th in Buffalo, New York. They announced
I'm not talking about Texas.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is not Buffalo, New York.
Forgive me. You just asked me other cases.
Well, okay. Let me rephrase my question.
Sorry.
Is that a serious problem here in Texas? Is it happening?
Yeah, I'm with you. We're not as concerned about New York. The Chick-fil-A case is what brought this to everyone's attention. And think about Chick-fil-A. They're a big player. They've got a lot of support. What if you were an individual? What if you're a small business that didn't get the media attention, didn't have the millions of fans? This bill's needed to protect all of us. Chick-fil-A is a good example, but individuals need this protection even more, and so does small businesses. So no, you're right. Chick-fil-A's got a lot of attention, but this is to protect all of us.
Well, many times, obviously, you have different corporations, business groups. They do contribute to different religious organizations, whether Jewish organizations, Catholic charities. What does the governmental entity do? They have to articulate that we are denying you this license or this spot for the reason because of the contributions to a religious organization?
So, Senator, if you were denied, if you were treated adversely, as the bill describes, then you, as the individual, the business, you would have to show the government did it motivated by your affiliation with or contribution to a religious organization. So the burden is still on the plaintiff to prove their case. I know you know that. So you'd still have to prove your case.
Some of these locations are very highly sought because they're prime locations for business. And there's a lot of competition for those locations.
Yes, sir.
So if you have 2 or 3 businesses competing to be provided a permission or a license by the city or the county, or to be allowed to be the one that wins that license. And all of them are competing. What would keep one of them from saying, well, I was denied that license because I contributed to Catholic charities?
Well, Senator, so far, the cities that have done this, they've told us the reason. They've been very open about it. In the case of Chick-fil-A, the city staff went through a long process, took bids, and they chose vendors they were going to recommend to the city. Chick-fil-A was on that list. They presented this list to the city council, and a member of the council said, he didn't say he was concerned about business. He said Chick-fil-A doesn't belong on there because of their history of discrimination, went into all that. talked about what we've discussed about groups like the Salvation Army, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So far, the government entities that have done this have been very open about their reasoning for it. But again, you're right. The plaintiff has got to prove their case. So if you've been discriminated against, you've got to prove that was the reason they did it. You're right about that. We're not changing that.
Well, and the vote that was taken by the city council, was it majority vote or?
I believe it was. Yes, sir.
So there was a vote. Some obviously didn't agree with not allowing Chick-fil-A into the airport.
No, that's right. There was a vote of the city council. That's right.
Well, that's how democracy works. If it's majority vote, maybe for several reasons, it could be multiple reasons why they were not provided with a license permission to take that prime location at the airport.
No, Senator, they could have been. In this case, the members of the city council spoke to the media and talked during the meetings, and they told us what was motivating it. But you're right. If you're going to bring a claim under this bill, you'd have to prove it. You're right. And sometimes you wouldn't be able to. If you couldn't show that the city did this based on your affiliation with a religious group or contribution to them, then you would not have a case under this bill. You're right about that. You still got to prove your case.
Well, and I guess my concern is also with you have 9 members on the city council. I don't know how many members are in San Antonio, but obviously an individual may have different reasons for voting no.
Yes, sir.
And then we try to impute that to the whole city. I don't think that's good public policy.
Oh, I understand what you mean, and of course, just like us, the city, the government, the people of the city act through those city council members, and they take votes on behalf of the people. And so if they take an action, and that's the reason they did it, then they're held accountable for it. But you would have to prove your case. You're right. It'd be harder sometimes than others. In the case of Chick-fil-A in San Antonio, it would be pretty easy because the city councilman involved, they told us what their motivation was. But it may not always be that way. And if it wasn't, this bill wouldn't help.
So I guess to me, it seems that we continue to push legislation that allows people to use religious beliefs to be able to choose, select whoever they want to provide services, and they're sanctioned by the government. At some point, whatever religion comes on top of all the other religions, you can discriminate, like provided under Senate Bill 17, against a person because they're gay, because they're LGBT, because they're Jewish, because they're Muslim. At some point, we're going to become like a theocracy, like Iran, where one religion dominates, and you have the priests and the I don't know what you call them, but pretty much run government.
Right.
And it seems to me that we're taking steps in that direction. We're very far from that, but we continue to use religion, freedom of religion, and turn that around because right now, under the Constitution, people can exercise whatever religion belief they want.
Right.
But we're just turning that around and using government to be able to sanction discrimination against certain people, against certain religious beliefs, and against certain lifestyles.
When you see the amendment, I think you're going to like it because it really does address that. Because with the amendment, and you'll see it in a moment, the amendment says we treat all religions the same. You're exactly right about that. That's important.
Anyway, thank you, Senator Hughes, for answering my questions.
Thank you, Senator.